For our first matchup, we are going to be looking at the Gukesh versus Fabiano Caruana matchup. And this is very critical game. This is a very critical matchup, I should say, because if Gukesh would win with the white pieces, he would have overtaken Fabi in the leaderboard and take the sole lead. And he is playing with the white pieces, so he's definitely looking for something sharp and try to win the game. On the other hand, Fabi, if he has any chances, he's willing to take it and extend his lead. And of course, he's okay with a draw as well, since he's playing with the black pieces. The game started off with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, d3. We have a Italian game. d6, a4, a5, knight c3, h6. Bishop e3. We have a pretty standard position so far out of the opening, where Fabi is spending quite a lot of time, and this is somewhat surprising, since the Italian game is a very common played opening at the top level. Maybe perhaps he wasn't really expecting the knight c3 setup, but this is still also a relatively common one. And he gives up the bishop pair, which is a slightly surprising decision, but a perfectly acceptable one. Black goes knight f6, knight drops down to d2 from white, with the idea to push f2, f4 and start a kingside attack. Black plays castle short, pawn goes to f4, and black responds with bishop to e6. White does not want to trade the bishop, so he plays bishop b5, attacking the knight on c6. Knight goes to g4. Black is desperate to winning the bishop pair. One of the alternatives white had in this position, instead of giving the bishop on e3 down the road, could have been playing the move f4 to f5, attacking the bishop. And after bishop takes c4, knight takes c4. Now black cannot play the move knight g4, since they would lose the knight on g4. And this would also be a very interesting approach for white, since he can try to maybe start a kingside attack by bringing the queen to f3 and bringing more pieces onto the kingside. But that was not what Gukesh wanted. He played bishop b5. Fabi responded with knight g4, queen e1, knight takes and bishop, queen takes. Fabi has already spent an hour, and I think time is going to be a very critical factor, especially in a matchup like this. He goes e takes f4, rook takes f4 by Gukesh, trying to bring the other rook to the king side. Knight goes to e5, with the idea to potentially play the move c5, c6 to try to attack the bishop on b5. Pawn goes to d4, kicking the knight back, knight g6, rook drops to f2, queen g5, offering a queen trade, and white does not really let the tension go. He's like, if you want to take my queen, take it in my terms, rather than me taking it on your terms. Rook goes to d8, rook goes to b1, b6, g3. Both sides are somewhat shuffling and improving their position slightly, and white knight jumped to e3, attacking the bishop. Bishop found itself on h3, queen d2, and black responds with the move d5. Instead of the move queen d2, perhaps an interesting move could have been knight to g2, with the idea to relocate the knight to a even better square, but that was not the chosen move. Gukesh instead decided to play queen d2, where black strikes the center with the move d6, d5. After pawn takes d5, knight takes d5, rook e1. Now black is slightly on the favorable side because he's putting a lot of pressure in the center, and there is a lot of pins ongoing, and the times are ticking. In this moment, Fabi has 15 minutes, and Gukesh has around 25 minutes. Knight takes d5, queen takes d5. Now the white king is feeling a little bit lonely, since the black queen and the bishop are putting some pressure on the g2 square, and the white pieces are only defending the king at the moment. Rook went to f4, strengthening the center a little bit, since the queen is defending already the king side. Queen d6, queen f2, bishop dropped to e6, bishop dropped to d3, and now the times are more or less even. So we're going to be seeing a very exciting end to this game, as Gukesh now has less time than Fabi after the move rook b1. Rook went to c8, perhaps trying to open up the c-file, which he did, and then played the move bishop to c4, offering the trade of bishops. In this case, in this position, white could have taken the bishop, and after rook takes bishop, rook takes f7 was possible, but the idea for black is after you take, queen takes on f7, and then queen takes d4, black would have some compensation, have some initiative, let's say, not compensation since the material is even, would have a nice position since the white king is slightly in danger. So that did not happen. Queen went to e3 after a really long thing, and f6 was played. Rook b1, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, queen c6, attacking the two pawns at the same time. White responded with d5, queen c5 check, rook dropped back, rook e8, rook b5, queen d6. A little bit of shuffling. White is doing okay at the moment. The position is roughly balanced, and position seems equal until this moment where Gukesh played this move queen to a4 with severe time pressure, preventing the move a4, and now his king was in very, very big danger. The best move in this position, which did happen later in the game, was the move rook b8, and this would have caused a huge trouble in the white's camp, as this pawn is unfortunately not capturable from white, since the queen e3 check comes with a big impact. Queen e4 check, king has to go to g1, and now rook to b2, threatening mate on g2. So white would have to block with rook f2, and after rook queen to e3, the pin is unstoppable, and that would be the end of the game. So queen takes a5 would not be possible after rook b8, but this would put a lot of pressure to Gukesh to find the defensive resources. Instead, black played queen e3 check, which is not a bad move since he played the move rook b8 on the next move, king g2, queen e4 check, and white played the move king h3. The white king is in very serious trouble at the moment, and indeed black has a winning position, but the move to find is extremely difficult with 1 minute left for both sides. The winning move here was the surprising looking move king to g8, but the idea is essentially that white does not really have that many good moves. They cannot simply pass, they have to do something. If they take the pawn on a5, now I can take the pawn on c4, so that would be a very good trade for me. I'm putting pressure on this pawn and creating a pass pawn where your king is still weak, and you have to deal with that. If you play something like after king g8, queen to d7, or perhaps first rook f4 and then queen to d7, now I just can play something like h5, and my rook on b8 is covering the back rank so that there are no checks at all, and my king is going to be very safe on g8. So the reason I covered this idea is because the game rook b4 was played, and after rook f4, queen went down to e2, but white queen went into d7, hoping for some perpetual, and after rook b2, attacking the pawn, white managed to escape the game by giving the perpetual check, and they agreed to a draw. So this was a really exciting matchup, since Fabi had a big chance to win and extend his lead, but still very good defending by Gukesh at the end, securing the half point, and this might be crucial going into the next two rounds. The next game that we'll be taking a look at is between Anish Giri playing with white versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave playing with the black pieces. Anish plays the move c4, trying to avoid perhaps the knight off or the Grunfeld, and taking MVL to a different territory by playing c4. So both sides are playing the English, and Anish is playing this line with the move e4, controlling the d5 square with as many pawns as possible. Bishop to e2, rook to b1, trying to go b4, bishop goes to g4, black is okay, giving up the light square bishop in order to control the d4 square with his knight. Knight goes to c5, castles and knight to d4. So white has the bishop pair, but black has a very good control of the d4 square. White goes f4, trying to start a kingside attack, and black responds with c6, attacking the knight, and white ignores that idea. They could definitely have retreated the knight to c3, but perhaps they did not like the fact that something like bishop f6 would be quite annoying. So they got rid of this knight very quickly, and after e takes, knight went to b4, with opposite colored bishops on the board at the moment. Rook to e1, queen goes to e7, both sides are improving their pieces and slightly shuffling at this point where pieces are just moving back and forth, and in this moment white plays the move bishop to h3 and then rook to f1. Perhaps, maybe a slight inaccuracy, a move like g3, g4 would be possible to at least shut down the king side, but in this position a move like g5 could come in, and it would be very interesting to see how the game could play out if something like this were to happen, since black would have very good control on the dark squares later in the game. But none of that happened. White decided to keep the tension by playing the move rook f1, and after king g8, rook to g2, so perhaps white is the one who wants to open up the king side, but of course black takes this opportunity to take on g3. And after rook g3, queen goes to h4. Black is trying to start an attack on the king side. Bishop g4, king h7, rook h3, queen goes back to f6, and pieces were traded, and in this position, players decided to repeat in an interesting fashion. I do believe that black could have possibly played on by playing something like maybe rook to h8, perhaps move the queen, move the king, and try to start an attack on the king side, but black just wanted to repeat the position and made the draw, and both sides agreed to a draw at this point. The next game that we're going to be looking at is between Wesley and Nodirbek Abdusattorov. This was definitely the most exciting game of the round, with a lot of interesting moments, so let's get right into the action. Wesley starts off with d4, and Nodirbek responds with a queen's gambit accepted. e3, a solid line by white, and we get to the main. Queen's gambit accept a line position where white played the move bishop to e2. It's a very popular line, and after knight d7, knight went to c3. And after the move b5, Wesley played with the move d5. So far, Nodirbek has been probably recalling his preparation, has spent around 10 minutes to get here, whereas Wesley has been blitzing out the moves up to this point. And he's still blitzing, where Nodirbek is also somewhat blitzing, and the move e4 is very, very good. If black were to take this pawn on e4 with bishop takes e4, then here white can simply play the move rook to e1, trying to use the e-file, and white would be completely winning as black is not developed fully, and this king in the center would be having some big trouble. So, after the move e4, h6 was played, prophylactic against any bishops coming to g5, and then the bishop developed to d6. And here was the first moment where Wesley spent quite some time thinking, since he didn't know probably exactly which move is the best. He played the move bishop e3. An interesting idea in these types of positions is the move b2, b3. The idea is that white, instead of putting the bishop on e3, wants to put it on b2 and try to attack the queen on f6. If black takes the rook on a1, the idea is simply to play the move bishop to b2, attacking the queen, and after queen goes to a2, which looks very safe at the moment, the rook can go to a1, attacking the queen and winning the queen. And this would be a very good position for white. So, of course, after the move b3, black is not forced to take the rook. They can play something like short castles, where the position would be definitely around equal. So, Wesley played bishop e3, and that's just preference. Rook went to d1, improving his pieces. Knight went to d2, trying to go knight c4, bishop f4, and then some pieces came off the board, and it almost looked like the game was leading to a more or less draw, because the pieces were coming off the board, but at some point the game started to get very heated, where black played this move bishop to d3, attacking the rook, and then white played rook e1, and this passed pawn on e5 is a very big asset for the white pieces, so it's just going down the board. So far, Nodirbek is actually doing a very good job holding the equality, perhaps even has chances for even more if the king was not guarded well. So bishop c6, threatening checkmate on h1, knight went to e4. Now black cannot take the pawn on e7 with the rook, because that would be met by queen f8 check, attacking the king and then picking up the rook. So Nodirbek played the move queen to d7, which was the first inaccuracy, the big inaccuracy from the black side. The correct move was instead queen to e5, keeping this pressure on the pawn, and if the knight were to move anywhere, let's say something like knight c5, try to attack the queen, now the queen drops back to d5, and we would probably get a draw in the next few moves. But after the queen d7 move, perhaps a little too ambitious, Wesley had the opportunity to play queen f8 check and put his queen on f7, threatening knight f6 fork, which black needs to take care of. So king drops to h8, queen f8 check, repetition once so that white gets a little bit more time, and in this moment white played the correct move, knight f2, guarding all sorts of critical squares and especially guarding the pawn at the same time. So bishop dropped to b7, black is trying to go queen to c6 and try the checkmate on the g2 square. White responded with h4. And if black were to play queen to c6 here, threatening checkmate, the white knight would simply go to e4 and prevent the mate. So this would not really do any damage to the white king. So at this point, black unfortunately has to just keep shuffling and can't really do too much. And white is in total domination, controlling the position and is completely winning. And at this point, Wesley had to play the move rook to f3, which is fairly intuitive if you think about it, because he's trying to play the move rook to f8 check, and if black were to play the move queen f1 check, white can simply play the move king h2, and the move rook f8 will be unstoppable. If black were to try to play something like bishop c6, attacking the rook and hoping for a checkmate on g2, if the rook moves, the rook does indeed move, but it moves to the f8 square, threatening giving a check. And after the king goes to h7, queen goes to f5 with check, and after the move g6, queen goes to f7, and that's going to be checkmate. So this would be completely winning if Wesley played the move rook to f3, but instead he played king h2, which is still winning, but it's not as simple as it was before. So couple of accurate moves, still completely winning at this point. Black is not really threatening anything, so white is moving his pieces around a little bit on the freely side, and here, this was the moment where Wesley made a mistake. He played the move queen f5, giving black the opportunity to play queen h2 and queen takes g3 check, and was able to make a draw, as we're going to be seeing shortly. But the correct move in this position was to play the move knights from g6 to h4, with the idea to play knight to f5 and attack this pawn on g7, and that would be winning for the white pieces. But after Wesley didn't capitalize on these moments, the game was basically a draw, since Nodirbek was able to defend perfectly and did not give any chances. It looked like the king is in big trouble, but indeed it was completely safe all the time, let's say, although the king was moving all around the board, and eventually Nodirbek was able to find a nice perpetual and save the game with a draw. This was definitely the most exciting game of the round. The next game that we're going to be looking at is between Deac, Bogdan-Daniel and Alireza Firouzja. Of course, Firouzja definitely wanted to win this game with black in order to catch up with the leader, whereas Deac also wants to win the game so that he doesn't stay at the bottom of the table. So we started the game off with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3. We had a Nimzo Indian, e3, and a very standard variation of the Nimzo. Rook e8, both sides are simply developing their pieces, and black finally strikes in the center with the move e6, e5, threatening to go e4. Bishop drops to e2, knight e4, offering some trades and developing the pieces. And after more trades, now white has the bishop pair, but this is a temporary advantage as he is picking up a pawn, and although black has an extra pawn, it is gone now. Players just slowly traded everything and had a very simple and solid draw without too much excitement happening in this game. I don't think any of the players could complain. They didn't really have any choices, and chances, so a solid draw is more than fine. The final game that we're going to be looking at is between Nepomniachtchi and Praggnanandhaa, which the game started off with a Ruy Lopez, and we had an open Spanish variation with played by Pragg in this game. So bishop e7, bishop f4, castles knight d4, so it seems like Nepo is just deciding what line to play, whereas in the meantime, Pragg has done his homework really well, just recalling his preparation, I believe, because he showed some really good understanding. After the move e takes f6, he played the move bishop c5, relatively quickly putting pressure on f2, so this must be some sort of preparation, in my opinion, because both sides are playing absolutely perfect chess, and relatively quickly without spending too much time. So queen goes to h7. It looks very interesting and very exciting, but in the reality, this is just a very solid position with a forced draw for the black pieces, and after Pragg found all the moves, the game simply ended in a draw. So an exciting draw, but this must be some sort of preparation, as Pragg seemed to know everything and recalled his lines and did a fairly good job of doing so and not giving any chances for Nepomniachtchi to win the game. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe.